Well, Uncle Mark, we got a treat ahead of us.
We do. We have a special guest today, and Uncle Dan, you and I come from one particular strand of the religious experience from which we escaped, and we easily speak to a certain group, even though we try to speak to a broader one. But it's important.
And by that, you're talking about East Side Salt Lake.
To East Side represent Salt Lake, so to say. And so it's always good to bring on different voices, people from a different experience. And today we have just such a guest. We have Mandisa Thomas, who is the president and founder of Black Nonbelievers, Inc. Mandisa, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show.
It's very it's our pleasure to have you, and thanks so much for being with us. Now you've been in the non-belief movement for quite a while, haven't you?
Yes, I've been involved in the atheist and non-believer secular community now since 2011, so that makes 7 years that I've been active.
Nice. Well, that's a nice long run at it. I've been at it as an amateur most of my life, but I'm
Yeah, interestingly enough, there have been people who have done this longer, but it feels like I've done it. It feels like it's been longer than that, but yes, it's been a while. It's been enough to see some serious changes in the movement, and to see a lot of good things and not so good things happen. So yes, I am. I guess I'm considered a vet right now.
What made you decide to jump into professional atheism? What was the kind of catalyzing moment?
Well, when I first got started in the movement, there weren't very many Black atheists that I could connect with offline, and so Black Nonbelievers was started simultaneously to me working my full-time job. I was the event services manager at the Centers for Disease Control, the main campus. And from there...
So you planned all the outbreaks, is that what you're saying?
Yes, don't tell anyone though.
Okay, this is just between us.
That's between us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in between that time and with being connected with other leaders and other people in the movement, the momentum and the visibility just grew. Because my background was in events, that was what I do. We were able to successfully put BN on the map, if you will, by putting on larger events that connected us with other Black atheists and also the broader secular community. And so it was very, very helpful in increasing our visibility, as well as the type of work that we were able to do. And so as a result, the requests for appearances and for working on various projects increased over the years. And so in March of this year, I decided it was time to focus on activism full time. So I resigned from my job. And because BN is still growing, and as well as my presence in the community. And so I decided that it was time for me to take that leap, because I had been putting it off actually for a couple of years, but it was time this year.
Nice. And you're in the Atlanta area. I'm a little familiar with Atlanta. I've probably spent about a year there. And I was watching one of your YouTube presentations. You had a really interesting story, and I think it was when you went to Morehouse to give a presentation.
Yes, I remember that. That was from...
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So one of the local attendees of the meetups here, he's also a member of our Facebook group online. Actually, he's a white professor who teaches at Morehouse philosophy. Mm-hmm. And he asked me would I speak with one of his classes. And so on a day that I was off, this was November of 2012, he asked me to speak. He's a fellow atheist, non-believer. And he asked me to speak with his class about my atheism, the fact that I'm an atheist, as well as Black non-believers. And so interestingly enough, the students didn't really know why I was there at first. And then when I told them I was an atheist and I asked the class, how many how many of them identified as religious. And there were some professors in there. Almost the entire class's hand went up, if not almost
Right.
the entire class. And so, in speaking about my experience, my upbringing, and my reintroduction into the identification as an atheist, I talked about Black nonbelievers, and I talked some about, the highly religious climate in the Black community, which, just
Hmm.
that cannot be denied. But there were some students there who had some really, really great questions for me. It was like they were awestruck. They were like, "Wow!" Like I found out from the professor later that many of them remarked that I was the first Black atheist they had ever seen, and
And
which
that's a thing in the Black community, isn't it? That there's an issue with, even if you are a non-believer, as a Black person, there's a lot of pressure to keep your mouth shut.
there's a lot of pressure due to the very high religiosity in the community, as well as the traditional
Hmm.
factor. The church has played a significant role in the community building, or the community representation, if you will. That's how I like to put it. And there's this sense of
Yeah.
tradition with that comes along with being a person of color and being Black, and what it means to be Black. And being an atheist, it's like you're rejecting your identity as being Black. Like there's no way that Black folks can be atheists, or if we are, then certainly we're keeping it to ourselves. Or if those who may privately identify as atheists and who are open activists, they don't speak on their atheism much. And which, for some valid reasons, we certainly understand why. Because yes, there is pressure. There is that
Hmm.
sense of tradition, and you have and again, the influence of the church is still so very, very strong, particularly in the Black community, that it makes the conversation and it makes the identification that much more difficult.
Yeah, I think that there's a thing, because both Uncle Mark and I left Mormonism, and there was this, there can be this very strong sense of, you're abandoning your community, you're abandoning your religion, you're abandoning your family. But no one ever accuses us of abandoning our race if we leave our religion,
Hmm.
True.
Yep.
Yeah.
or turning our back on on that community, which
Yes.
is something that Black atheists have to face, isn't it?
It is. It is very much so, and also it's also the idea that it isn't it isn't very well discussed in our communities, and so there is just a sense of ignorance. The fact that, wow, I didn't realize that Black folks could be atheists, and I mean, we can be anything. That's You have Black
Right.
conservatives. I mean, you have we are diverse very much across the board. But when it comes to religion, and the letting go, not even letting go of belief, but also openly identifying with the atheist identity, it is just almost still unheard of to many of the Black folks. As well as, there is while our numbers are growing within the secular community, we still aren't very well represented. And so now we're dealing with multiple issues and multiple concerns when it comes to the representation and the identity. So that was the main premise of founding Black Nonbelievers, was to try to resolve two very specific issues, to increase the
Right.
visibility and presence within the Black community and the secular communities, as well as letting fellow Black atheists know that they aren't alone, that there are
Right.
communities out here, and that there is more representation than we realize. It's just a matter of us finding each other.
Right. And that's what I think was so fascinating about that story about Morehouse is, the presumption I always have is it, kids these days, younger people, college kids, are far, far, far less religious than, my generation, the generation before me. So the fact that you startled them as college kids, as being one of the first atheists they'd ever met, I found that story super fascinating. And I wonder, Mandisa, if you could speak for a second about why the church is so ingrained traditionally in the Black community in America. Why is it something that is so deeply embedded in the culture that it makes coming out as an atheist, or just as someone who wants to leave the church for whatever reason, difficult?
So yes, there are a number of reasons for that, and we must look at there's a traditional, historical and societal reasons for that. During slavery, um, it was against the law for blacks to read and write. The only book that was allowed to be interpreted was the Bible, and so many Christians had to accept, many slaves or the enslaved had to accept Christianity or they died.
Right.
And so the church became a part of, and the religion became a part of, many slaves, daily lives. It didn't stop many slaves from rebelling,
Mm-hmm.
but also, but yes, it was the conditioning of the religion that that perpetuated slavery in this country. But also, once slavery ended, and also when the Reconstruction period ended, that was a time of Black progress.
Right.
There were Black congressmen, a lot of Black businesses that came about, but that also brought about the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
And the enactment of segregation laws, and there was a lot of violence committed against Black folks, and so the church became the institution that supported the community for the most part. There are a lot of historically Black colleges and universities that were started in churches, and also the church became that support system when the legal system was the basically the United States effectively disfranchised Blacks.
Right.
Legally, there are issues that, and there were, people had land taken away from them. They had, I mean, really just looking at the history of, segregation and Jim Crow and violence against Black folks. The church was that institution that many people held on to.
Sure.
As their as their refuge. Their belief in God got them through. So there is this, and also it was one of the only institutions where Blacks could rise to prominence at that time.
Right.
The
Right. Right.
pastor was very highly revered. Church was the place that people could, dress in their best. It was, definitely a community. The community there, and that's where people felt safe.
Right.
So we have to take those factors into consideration as to why the church plays such a huge role in the Black community.
Yeah, and for those reasons, it makes a lot of sense. But also for, with the civil rights movement and different Black identity movements, it's always been peculiar to me that more Black people didn't reject that coercive history of the church, and that we don't see now a much bigger Black atheist community.
That is correct. Yes, that the religion and the church is still so very much ingrained in the Black community for those very reasons. Now, there is a history of free thought in the Black community, humanism, atheism. The founder of Black History Month, or the Foundation for Black History Month, was started by a freethinker, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Yeah.
And many people don't know that, and which is very, very alarming, because Black history in this country really is so vast, and it doesn't always include it. It isn't only made up of the civil rights movement, of the pastors and the preachers who have risen to prominence. And so, yes, there is there is this misidentity, if you will. There's a misrepresentation of the Black community, that there aren't any.
Right.
There were never any atheists. There were never any free thinkers. There were never any humanists. And so that is also part of our mission, is to re-educate and inform those who weren't aware, which sadly includes many of the Black folks.
So let's talk about that just for a moment. You have this great organization with that's geared toward people who are testing the waters, maybe of free thought and atheism or humanism. Our show has a very large listenership of people who may or may not be ready to who may have not quite let go of their Christian or their religious roots yet. Talk to us about what message you'd like to give to especially Black folks who are maybe thinking about coming out as non-believers, or who are thinking about dipping their toes into the waters of non-belief.
Or they're in the closet, or
they've been a non-believer for a while and they just are too afraid to come out to anybody. Tell us about what your message is to them.
4 simple words that we have said over and over again, and you are not alone.
Damn right.
Understand that whatever doubts you had, whatever you thought if you thought you were the only one who has ever experienced this, please know that you are not alone. And that doesn't just include other Black atheists. I've always intended for Black non-believers to be a starting point for those who are questioning religion and in favor of leaving, and also to get a sense of that, to have that safe space where they didn't have to deal with certain questions or certain things from other folks who didn't understand, whether it is other white atheists, because that can be an issue. But overall, the community is very welcoming and accepting and understanding. It's just that you have some folks who have their blind spots. But understanding that you are not alone. Many of us have been where you've been. We've had these questions. Many of us, I know growing up, even though I wasn't raised religious, I learned early about the imposition of Christianity in particular on slaves, on the slaves, on my ancestors.
Right.
And I also wondered why so many are still Christian. But when you understand the history of it, when you learn about it, you can understand it, but it's still pretty sad. So what those questions that you've had, we've been there. We totally understand it. There is a huge community of people who get it. Yeah. And it just takes, just know that we are here for you. And I think that is part of, that has been a very, very important part of the community building that, the atheist movement has sought to improve upon. Because yes, you can come to, your conclusions doing your either through observation, research, or both. But if you don't have anyone else to connect with, then it makes it that much more difficult.
It's so lonesome. It's such a lonesome journey if you're behind the wall of religion or something. And that's kind of what we aim to do too, is bounce a message over the transom, and you are not alone,
Yes, that has been the primary, slogan or statement that we that we impart, or that we let people know. You are not alone.
And we're gonna,
please know that.
I think we're gonna try and put a link to your organization on our website.
Oh, for sure we will.
In our little, we have a little sort of resources page, and we'll put that on there. But if they don't go through us, how can people reach you?
You can find us at our website, blacknonbelievers.org. It does revert to blacknonbelievers.wordpress.com, but it's blacknonbelievers.org. If you type that in, our website will come up. We are also on Twitter at B Nonbelievers. The B and the N are capitalized. You can contact us the same way you guys did through our website. Via email. We respond very quickly. You
did indeed.
Yes. And you can also find us as a resource on many other secular organizations pages, because we are very much, we advocate, we promote collaboration and coalition building. You can also find us on Meetup. All of our affiliate groups have Meetup pages where we post our events and our activities. And pretty much.
And that's important. You guys have but you have affiliates all over the country, right?
That is correct. Our most recent affiliate was established in the St. Louis area, St. Louis, Missouri. And so, yes, we do have, as a matter of fact, I was just in my hometown of New York, and, I attended a meetup with the New York City chapter there, as well as one of the other secular groups there. We did a joint meetup. And which turned out very, very well. It was an amazing time. Folks just got together. They shared their stories. There were there were a lot of first timers there who just shared their experiences, and we're just very, very glad to be in the presence of individuals that they could connect with and hopefully build more on that community part.
That's great. And as soon as Salt Lake City develops a black community beyond the Utah Jazz, I'm sure that we'll have a segment here.
Well, who knows? There might be a couple secret non-believers there, man. Yes. They need our love too. So.
But the one thing I always encourage people to join or participate with secular groups, no matter who they are. It may be a case of trial and error. The one thing I found is that, I offer advice to groups who have people of color in them, maybe not to be too imposing, but, just to kind of gauge where the people are, so that they may know whether they're comfortable or not. But I encourage our members and other people of color to start with an atheist group, a secular group, period.
Yeah, start with what's close at hand and see if it works. And
yes,
for the most part, I would say, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, I would say it's a pretty welcoming group of people. The atheist community, would you say that that's true?
Yes, I agree. Yes, for the most part, especially offline, and that's also another area that we've yes. Because the online community can be very brutal and vicious, and I encourage people to look beyond the online spaces, because that's where you get a really good sense of how people are when you connect with them in person.
I totally agree. I think we have a lot of work to do as a community, a lot of work, and we're better at doing the work when we see each other face to face. Rather than Twitter.
Yes.
Well, Mandisa Thomas, thank you so much for coming onto the show. We really appreciate your willingness and your time, and we'll hope to talk to you again in the future.
Absolutely, and thank you both very much for having me once again on the show. It has been a pleasure and an honor, so I really do appreciate it very much.
Now, don't get crazy with the honor thing. Come on now. No, it's been awesome. Thanks, Mandisa.